Good evening. This is Pick and Pop Radio here, brought to you by The Grueling Truth. Make sure you check out Facebook.com/The Grueling Truth for all information on The Grueling Truth. They just posted a link 14 hours ago to the top 10 boxers since 1970. And then, of course, Aaron Ferguson and I's show has been posted, including another top 10 wide receivers in NFL history by Mike Goodpaster, one of the owners of The Grueling Truth. So I am Rodney Newpol. I work for ESPN Peoria out of Peoria, Illinois. I co-host a weekday show from 3 to 6 p.m. Central Time. And I also host Peoria Fantasy Focus, 9 to 11 every Sunday morning with my co-host Skeeter Robinson. I'm joined again by Aaron Ferguson, a writer for HoopsHabit.com, and also works a little NBA writing with DraftKings. Aaron, how are you doing this evening?
Good. How are you doing, Rodney?
I'm doing well. It's Tuesday night, so if you're listening to this a little bit later in the week, we are covering from Tuesday night beyond. There are a few games going on in the NBA right now, but we won't be talking about those. We're going to be looking at Wednesday and further. And Aaron, I know you spend a little bit of time with DraftKings and just kind of putting together, maybe analyzing daily fantasy basketball. Now, before and I'm not even going to get into logistics of when daily fantasy is legal and when it's not, because you never know what's going to happen with all these states. But when you put together, or when you looked at your DraftKings, how do you analyze it on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, some of the things I look for are two teams that score a lot, because scoring is very important to the game of basketball and daily fantasy sports. And so I look for teams that score, and then I look from there, who's passing the ball, who's getting those assists, who's getting those minor things that don't mean much in the actual box score to an NBA game, but mean a lot to fantasy players that get bonus points such as assists, rebounds, steals, blocks. So I look for some of those things, teams that are very good defensively, but also teams that are going to score a lot.
Yeah, of course, and so do you use the Vegas spreads as far as, total points that they're projecting, or do you use your own projections of points to point totals?
What I typically do is I'll just go and pull up the points per game by team, and then just kind of add them up that way and see what the two teams are averaging per game and combine them, and then decide, okay, so is this going to be, how does this stack up against the other day's slate of games? What games are going to be higher scoring than the others? Right.
And then looking ahead at Wednesday's slate, of course, in the NBA, there are 11 games on the NBA slate for Wednesday. Let me run by those real quick, and then we can kind of start throwing some names out for Wednesday. We got Knicks at Heat, Pacers at Magic, Cavaliers at Washington Wizards, Detroit Pistons are in Boston to take on the Celtics, Toronto at Brooklyn, Denver at Minnesota, Dallas at New Orleans, Utah at San Antonio, Charlotte at Phoenix, Memphis at Oklahoma City, and Los Angeles at Portland. And I know, Aaron, you probably spend each day analyzing, so looking at day ahead, maybe a little bit difficult, but if you look at that Wednesday slate, what jumps out at you as possibly a high-scoring game that we could include a lot of players in?
Yeah, there's two games that I have pegged for pretty high-scoring games. The first one's in the Eastern Conference between the Detroit Pistons and Boston Celtics. The two teams are averaging 204.1 points per game this season combined, and they're meeting for the third time in the season series. Their first meeting was a 119-116 Pistons win. The second was more of a defensive game where it was 99-93 Celtics, even though the Pistons were leading that game the majority of the way. So I think there's a great possibility for another defensive game. There's another great possibility for another high-scoring game. Who knows? Those decisive, I guess it's not so much decisive, but the third game of the series could be completely different from both of those even.
Sure. And so go ahead with your second one.
Yeah, the second one I have in the Western Conference is between the Los Angeles Clippers, who are 22-13 on the year, and the Portland Trailblazers, who are 15-22 on the year. The Blazers just got Damian Lillard back, who scored a game-high 27 points, and the Blazers win in the first game of the season series, 102-91. And the Clippers will actually be without Blake Griffin, who led in scoring with 23 points when the Clippers won the second game of the season series, 102-87. So they're also going to see who's going to split up the third game of the series so far this year.
Yeah, now, I mean, the Warriors are off tomorrow, so we're not looking at a slate with the Golden State Warriors. But let's talk a little bit about the Warriors here real quick. I mean, you have to take into account, obviously, Steph Curry, Draymond Green are guys that put up big numbers, but, I mean, you have to take into account who Golden State's playing on a normal basis because of sitting Steph Curry and those guys fourth quarter. I mean, is there anything in your analyzing that talks about possible blowouts? I mean, how do you analyze that?
Well, that's something that's a little bit tougher because, games aren't played on paper. It's as simple as that. The games are played out on the court. For example, the Timberwolves just lost to the Philadelphia 76ers, which they probably shouldn't have, given that the Wolves are 12-23 now, and the Sixers are, 4-33, I believe, something along those lines.
3-3 since Ish Smith got traded.
Right, exactly. And there's certain things like that you can't account for. But games that I do think are going to be a little one-sided, you can kind of tell when it's a team like the Thunder or Spurs or Warriors, for that matter, playing against a lower conference team. So those are games where I may look for a bench player that's going to get, a lot of playing time in the fourth quarter if the game's a blowout, because those statistics, those fantasy points are going to matter just as much as if Steph Curry was going to play the entire game, the entire fourth quarter.
Right, and I think that's what fantasy players need to keep in mind is that, the entire game, the stats still matter, no matter if it's first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, stats still matter when they get it. And, so I was curious at what most people do as far as in blowout situations or perceived blowout situations, but I understand what you get as far as, games are played on the court and not in paper. So, let's look at Oklahoma City real quick. It's a night where Oklahoma City plays, and they would play kind of a grinding out Memphis team, where I would call Memphis more of a defensive team than anything. They're giving up 98 a game, so one of the top defensive teams in the league. How do you assess such a great scoring team in Oklahoma City against kind of the grinded out Memphis Grizzlies style?
One thing I definitely take a look at, and this is on a daily basis, I'll take a look at each individual player. So, for example, picking Russell Westbrook, and I just see how they're doing in their last 3, 4, 5, up to 10 games. And, for instance, Westbrook's averaging 53.9 fantasy points per game over his last 8. He's averaging 59.9 fantasy points per game in 2 games this year against the Grizzlies. So I look at, how they've done against their competition, how they've done, on a consistent basis over their past couple games, and I kind of make my determinations based on that.
Right. And looking at the NBA schedule for tomorrow, outside of the fantasy realm, what are we looking at? Obviously we talked last week sometime about how the Eastern Conference was bunched up, and it obviously hasn't changed too much in the last few days. But how does this coming 3, 4, 5 days of basketball really kind of change the landscape of both the Eastern and Western Conference?
Especially for the Eastern Conference with the teams that are so bunched up, you have just on Wednesday night you have the Pacers and Magic, who are 19-15 and 19-16 respectively, battling for a playoff spot. You have the Pistons and Celtics, who are 19-16, 19-15 respectively, batting for a playoff spot. And all those teams are there within the last, I think, 7, 8, 9, and 6 playoff spots, for example. And these games really do go a long way because one team could just get red hot from here. The Pistons last year had, I think, 9 wins it was entering the new year, and they strung off 8 or 9 wins in a row. So really, over these next couple games could be the turning point of one of these 30 teams seasons where they could actually make the playoffs.
Right. Kind of looking at, let's look at the Eastern Conference first. I mean, we talked last week about there's a few teams that we're pretty confident are going to make the playoffs. Let's talk about individual players that may be kind of sneaky players that could lead teams to good things in the playoffs. And one guy I wanted to mention to you, Aaron, is Bobby Portis of the Chicago Bulls, coming on fairly strong. At the beginning of the year, he He did not play a lot for Fred Hoiberg. He's starting to play a little bit more. Bulls are playing pretty well coming in tonight, winning 4 in a row. Is Bobby Portis a guy that could be a big factor in a postseason series?
Yeah, I think so, because what Fred Hoiberg has done all year is he's gone deep into his bench. And what Portis has done this year, he's averaging 8.7 points per game and 4.8 rebounds per game. You can't ask for much better in 16 minutes off the bench, especially coming from a 20-year-old rookie these days. So Fred Hoiberg has a lot of weapons, and Portis could certainly be a player that really sparks something in Chicago.
Yeah, and looking at, let's take the Cleveland Cavaliers. Obviously, we hear about all the big names, LeBron James, Kevin Love. Even when I think Kyrie Irving gets healthy, and he's going to be a big factor. Who's the one guy for Cleveland that could be a big spark for them once the postseason gets here?
Man, Tristan Thompson's playing really well right now, but I'm probably going to go with J.R. Smith. You look at J.R. Smith, and he has over 10 years of experience, NBA experience, and he can really be a streaky shooter. And he as well as he can shoot you into games and kind of, I guess, separate the Cavs from any other team, he could also shoot you right out of the game. So I think J.R. Smith's play is going to be crucial.
Now, you cover the Detroit Pistons, and, there's been talks about Brandon Jennings possibly being sent out. What have you heard about Brandon Jennings possibly being traded here the last couple days?
Most recently, it sounds like that the Pistons are interested in keeping Jennings. In fact, Stan Van Gundy mentioned today that the Pistons are looking to, or are open to signing Jennings long term. If he is okay with coming off the bench behind Reggie Jackson, who has certainly played very well as a starter in Detroit. Of course, Jennings has only played 4 games since returning from his left Achilles injury, but against the Magic the other night, he had 17 points and 6 assists off the bench. So he's playing well right now. We still have more to see. He's only 4 games in after his, 11-month layoff. But I think Jennings gives the Pistons the best chance to make the playoffs and the best chance to succeed in the playoffs. And so I don't think the Pistons will move him.
So, is Brandon Jennings the guy for the Pistons that, is he the Bobby Portis? Is he the Tristan Thompson? Is he the guy that, you mentioned he gives them the best chance to make the playoffs? Is he kind of the guy they really need coming down the last half of the season?
Well, the guy they need the most is Reggie Jackson because he's been the X factor in wins. He's more aggressive when they win, and he's a better ball distributor when they win because he's scoring and he's being aggressive. But I think Brandon Jennings will give the best opportunity to make the postseason out of any other trade options that are out there, such as the Knicks, who are reportedly interested in acquiring Jennings. So I think Jennings will be a major factor on the Pistons from here on out because the bench has been absolutely horrible, last in the league in scoring, and that's exactly what Jennings was drafted to do when he was drafted, and that's why the Pistons acquired him, was the score. So I think it'll be a good fit keeping him on the bench, and I think he does give the Pistons the best chance to make the playoffs.
Let's look at the Western Conference real quick, and then I want to get to the remaining games this coming week. And, let's talk Oklahoma City Thunder first. And, I've always said all along that I think the Thunder, I really feel the Thunder are the one team that could really upend Golden State this year. Obviously, I think San Antonio's got a good shot as well. We talked last week about the Clippers, but I really like Oklahoma City's makeup as far as possibly getting by Golden State this year. And we know of Durant, we know of Westbrook, and I would say we probably even know of Serge Ibaka, but do they have that one guy that really needs to step up in a playoff series for Oklahoma City to, let's say, beat Golden State? Who does Oklahoma City need to step up to beat Golden State in a 7-game series?
I think you have to really take a look at their starters. You see Draymond Green for the Warriors is so effective. He's literally probably one of the best all-around players in the game right now. He rebounds the ball. He can make all the passes. He can score when he needs to. He can shoot the three. So I think Serge Ibaka would be the biggest factor for the Thunder if they were in a 7-game series, not only defending Draymond Green, who is just an all-world player right now. But also offensively, he can stretch the floor and step out and make a three, and he can back down in the post. He can, he offers a mid-range jump shot. He can pass the ball. He can rebound. He can block shots. So I think Serge Ibaka would probably be the player I'd watch most closely in that series.
Los Angeles Clippers, another team, and they've won 6 in a row, and ironically done that without their best scorer. And when we talked last week about DeAndre Jordan and his emergence, is DeAndre Jordan that guy for the Clippers, or do you go as far as J.J. Redick or Crawford? What do you look at when you – how would the Clippers beat Golden State in a 7-game series? Who would they need to step up?
I think that would be a very interesting series. Of course, we saw that last postseason, but you look at the small forward position for both teams. You have, for the Warriors, Andre Iguodala and Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes probably the better of the two players. But then for the Clippers, who do you have at small forward? You have Wesley Johnson, Paul Pierce, and that's kind of who you've got at small forward. So the Clippers could either go small with lineups, they could go big with lineups, but how are they going to match up at the small forward position with the Warriors? And that's something that I think they need to take a look at, and that could even be spreading or stretching J.J. Redick to the small forward position. Great shooter he is. He could also be a good defender for him.
Lastly, let's talk a little bit of Golden State Warriors, and I know you've got a little experience here in Peoria, Illinois, and the name we always talk about here in Peoria, Illinois, no matter if he's a star or not, is Shaun Livingston. And I don't think there's any doubt that Shaun's kind of he's obviously not the star. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, even Andre Iguodala, bigger name than he is right now. But, just kind of talk to us about what Shaun Livingston has done and will continue to do for the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, Livingston's a very good point guard. He was one of the most explosive players when he was drafted. Now, not so much, of course. He had one of the most horrific injuries in the NBA, but now he's found his niche in the NBA. He's found his role with the Warriors. He's very capable of playing 20 minutes a night to give Curry a blow if he needs it. And what he's going to do is he's going to distribute the ball. He's going to move the ball and play great defense, and that's exactly what the Warriors need from him in the second unit.
All right, Aaron, we got about, 7 or 8 minutes left of the show. Again, you're listening to Pick and Pop Radio here, brought to you by The Grueling Truth. Make sure you go to Facebook.com, go to /The Grueling Truth. You can find out all the shows that The Grueling Truth has up. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the latest post was the top 10 boxers since 1970. Mike Goodpaster put that together. And then, of course, Aaron and I's show from New Year's Day has been posted. Aaron, we've got a few minutes left here. I want to kind of go over and make some picks for some games that are going on here these next few days. And we're going to extend Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, even Sunday games. And I won't go every game, but let's both make some picks and see how we do. How about it?
Sure.
All right, let's go. I'm just going to pick a few for Wednesday, and let's start with Indiana at Orlando. And I'll start us with this one. I think Indiana, obviously, Paul George has been up and down a little bit here recently for the Pacers. I like Orlando to win that game on the road. Victor Oladipo has obviously slowed down a little bit since his start at the beginning of the year. But I am still taking Orlando because of the home court advantage. Who are you taking, Indiana, Orlando, Wednesday night?
I'll take the Pacers the way Paul George is playing. He's been on fire as of late. And even though they're coming off of a back-to-back, I think Oladipo struggles, Tobias Harris struggling. Vucevic is going to have a tough matchup at center. I don't know. I think the Pacers match up better than the Magic.
Sounds good. Let's go to the second game, and I'm going to let you pick the winner first, and let's go Dallas at New Orleans Wednesday night.
Dallas at New Orleans. That's interesting. I'm going to go with the Mavericks just because they have more experience. Dirk Nowitzki's playing well. I don't know. I think the Mavericks on the road against a Pelicans team that who knows what's really going on down there.
Yeah, I mean, New Orleans is really struggling, and I can't believe how bad they've struggled this year. Obviously, Anthony Davis has been a nice player, but I wonder and I worry how long Anthony Davis is going to want to stay in Orlando. I know he signed that big contract, but he's not going to want to keep losing. And after the playoffs of last year, they had hardly any chance of making the playoffs this year. I'm going to go with Dallas in that game as well. I think Dallas although it is a back-to-back night for Dallas. You know, Dallas is in Sacramento Tuesday night, and then they're at home Tuesday night, and then they go to New Orleans. I get a little bit nervous about back-to-back games, but I'll take New Orleans as well. The last game I want to cover on Wednesday night, let's talk Clippers at Portland. Aaron, can the Portland Trailblazers win another one and beat the Clippers?
I think they can win it because Blake Griffin's out. When the Clippers won their game of the series, Blake Griffin scored 23 points, but I'm going to pick the Clippers because DeAndre Jordan also had 24 rebounds. He's stepped into his role perfectly since Blake Griffin's gone out with his scoring. He's still rebounding and blocking shots, so I'm going to go with the Clippers.
Yeah, I think you nailed that one as well. I think the Clippers, you know, Chris Paul, obviously still a pretty good point guard. You know, I think when we talk point guards, you know, a lot of times he gets overlooked, and I certainly don't overlook him. I mean, he can distribute the ball just as well as anyone. You mentioned DeAndre Jordan playing really well. I'm going to take the Clippers on the road. So in our 3 games on Wednesday, I picked the Magic over the Pacers. You picked the Pacers over the Magic. We both went with Dallas winning at New Orleans, and we both went with the Clippers winning at Portland. Let's go 2 games on Thursday night. Let's go Boston at Chicago. Obviously, this is, you know, before the Bulls result on Tuesday night against the Bucks. Looks like they're going to beat the Bucks. That game has over 220 points scored already tonight. I'm going to go the Bulls. Bulls are playing really well right now. I mentioned Bobby Portis is coming off the bench playing well. Jimmy Butler is just at another level right now. So Fred Hoiberg maybe starting to figure things out as the head coach there. I'm going Bulls over Boston on Thursday night.
Yeah, I also like the Bulls, mainly because the Celtics are traveling from Boston to Chicago for that game on a back-to-back. But not only that, the Celtics also are going to be in a heated matchup against the Detroit Pistons on Wednesday night. Both the games in the season series have been very competitive, have gone down to the last minute. So I think the Bulls will benefit from that.
Yeah, obviously, and then, like I mentioned, the back-to-backs are always dangerous. My other game for Thursday night, Utah at Houston. Why don't you give us your pick on Utah at Houston first?
I'm going to go with I don't know. I'm going to go with the Jazz on the road, even though they're on a back-to-back. I have no faith in the Rockets. I don't know what it is. Despite Rudy Gobert being out, I think the Jazz will have a good post threat with Derek Favors. I think they size up well on the perimeter, and Gordon Hayward has a mismatch at small forward.
Yeah, I'll go with Houston in this one. I'll separate a little bit from you. I like James Harden. James Harden's a guy that, you know, obviously can put up points. He's also a guy that I think disappears at times. Utah started the season playing really well defensively. I'm not sure they've been as good defensively here in the last month or so. I'm going to go with the Houston Rockets in that one. Again, home court advantage. I think Houston wins that one. You know, these two teams just played the other day, and Houston came away with a 93-91 win, snapping the 4-game losing streak for the Rockets. I always kind of wonder about when teams play back-to-back, what happens in the second game. I'm going to take Houston, but I think this will be a pretty good one on Thursday night in the NBA. Let's move on to Friday. We're going to cover Friday. We'll go a couple games Friday, a couple games Saturday, a couple games Sunday, and then we'll sign off for the night. Aaron, looks like we have 10 games on Friday night. Kind of assessing the schedule. Let's start with Knicks at Spurs. Knicks at Spurs. Let me just ask you right away, do the Knicks have any chance?
I always say a team has a chance just for the very reason the game's not played on paper. What Greg Popovich has done with resting his starters over the past couple of years, you know, they're getting older. The oldest team in the NBA with Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker. But I think the Spurs, having that dynamic point guard and Tony Parker, something the Knicks lack. Kawhi Leonard is obviously a great two-way player, and Carmelo Anthony is a great scorer, but not a great defender. So I think the Spurs will remain undefeated at home.
Yeah, the home court advantage is just huge for San Antonio. San Antonio, Golden State, both teams that are undefeated at home. I'm going to go with San Antonio as well there. The next one's interesting to me because it's Miami at Phoenix. And what's going on with the Phoenix Suns? I mean, the Phoenix Suns have lost 9 in a row. They give up 142 points to Sacramento. Then they only scored 77 against the Lakers. Before we make our picks, what's going on with the Phoenix Suns?
The loss to Eric Bledsoe certainly hurt them. He was a scorer. He was someone who could move the ball pairing him with Brandon Knight in the backcourt was a great move. So I think the loss of Eric Bledsoe is part of the reason why they're scrambling, but I also think nobody's really stepping up. They have a young team. Rookie Devin Booker just really hasn't had a fair shake necessarily. He hasn't seized the opportunity he's been given, whether it's T.J. Warren or P.J. Hairston, P.J. Tucker. Nobody's really stepping up for the Suns. And I think that can all be contributed to why they're on a 9-game losing streak right now.
And then on the other side, Miami is not playing exceptionally well. So who are you taking, Miami, Phoenix?
Going to go with the Heat going out into the desert. I just think they have more dynamic scorers. They can focus in on Brandon Knight, who's been a terrific scorer. Dwayne Wade, obviously, very good. I think the Heat just have more weapons than the Suns do right now.
Yeah, and speaking of the Heat, how do you see Justice Winslow's career panning out? I mean, now he's kind of a fringe player. I'm looking at like daily fantasy, and he's kind of been a low minimum salary type guy, and he gives you a consistent 15, 16, maybe 17 points. How do you think that Justice Winslow's career is going to pan out? Whether it's with the Miami Heat or anywhere in the NBA. Well, how do you assess Justice Winslow?
Well, he's only shooting roughly 40% right now. He's 66% at the free throw line. I think he's going to be a good player in the NBA. I think he just needs some time. He got a lot of draft buzz for teams passing over him. The Hornets notably passed over him. The Pistons passed over him. So I think there's higher expectations for Winslow, especially after what Wade did in Miami when he was drafted and what he's done for the franchise. So I think that is part of it, and part of it's just kind of waiting his turn. He's averaging 27 minutes per game. But again, he's playing very well defensively. He has 1.1 defensive win shares this year, so he's playing very well defensively. It's just finding the offensive game and just making that transition from college to pro, which is so difficult.
Right. And one more game I want to get to on Friday is let's go Toronto at Washington. Toronto at Washington, 2 Eastern Conference teams there. I'm actually going to take the Washington Wizards. I'm not sure where you're going with this one. I'm going to take the Wizards. The Wizards are coming off an 18-point loss to the Heat, but beat Orlando after that. Wizards are one of the more disappointing teams in the league, but a team I think can make a little bit of a run, maybe the second half of the season. Obviously they're going to need a little bit more production, although John Wall's having a great season, almost 20 points, 10 assists per game. I think Washington's a team that can still make a little bit of run. I'm going to pick the Wizards to win this game. Where are you going with this game, Washington-Toronto?
I'm going to go with the Raptors. I think DeMar DeRozan's played very well this year. Luis Scola has expanded his range, developed a three-point shot. Jonas Valanciunas has played well since returning from his injury. Kyle Lowry's played well. Corey Joseph off the bench. I think the Raptors have more firepower and can match the intensity that John Wall brings.
All right, let's just do one game on Saturday, and then let's wrap it up here. Saturday is kind of a shorter slate in the NBA. My guess is because Sunday is such a bigger slate, and typically Sundays have been off for the NBA, or at least a lot of teams have been off because of the National Football League. But let's talk a little bit about Saturday, and let's go Bulls at Hawks Saturday afternoon. This game's in Atlanta. Bulls at Hawks. Where are you at with that one, Aaron?
Atlanta's 12-6 at home. They are similar to Fred Hoiberg's team. They distribute the ball. They use their bench. I think they're just going to feed off their home crowd, which is something you wouldn't have said 5 years ago. And I just think their brand of basketball is so difficult to match.
You're going the Hawks in that one?
Yep.
I'll also go with the Hawks. I just mentioned a little bit ago, I think the Bulls are playing well. They did win Tuesday night. I think I do believe they're going to win their next one. They're going to come into that one possibly a 6-game winning streak. Hawks at 21-14, pending Tuesday night's result, right there at the top with Miami in the Southeast. I like the Hawks bench a little bit, especially when they get Kent Bazemore going. I think he's kind of guy that can. I believe Bazemore is kind of the guy that they really need in a postseason series. We talked about that at the beginning of the show. I like what Paul Millsap's doing, 18 points a game. Jeff Teague passing the ball pretty well. I'm going to go with Atlanta in that one. but I think that one's probably one of my least confident games because both those teams I think can make a nice run in the playoffs. So we covered about 10 games. Aaron, when we get back to our next show, we're going to have a little standings between you and I and our picks. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds great. Sounds like a fun time.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up Pick and Pop Radio for tonight. We are getting ready to cover our first college basketball show, and we're going to cover that over this next coming weekend. We're going to handicap kind of next week's games a little bit. Aaron, before I let you go, I know you follow college basketball a little bit. Did you happen to see Oklahoma-Kansas last night?
Yeah, but did you see Virginia Tech beat fourth-ranked Virginia last night?
I know you're a big Virginia Tech fan, so it's more of a headline for you that Virginia Tech beat Virginia than Kansas beat Oklahoma. Is that right?
Well, I watched both games, so I think the Big Monday slate was very good. I think Virginia Tech, Buzz Williams finally gets a signature basketball win that could possibly change. I guess give the players confidence. He has a young team this year, but I think. Gosh, Buddy Hield, Kansas won that basketball game because they have more depth. But I think Buddy Hield is probably the best player in the country. He put on a show that I couldn't believe just watching him play.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal player. So, well, let's get to college basketball talk over the weekend. And this is our second edition of Pick and Pop Radio, brought to you by The Grilling Truth. For Aaron Ferguson, I'm Rodney Newpol. Aaron, last thing. What are you looking forward to the most this coming weekend in the NBA?
I think I'm going to be evaluating how the Pistons play. They have a couple of tough games against the Celtics and then one against the Nets, and then their schedule gets a little bit tougher from there. So I think for me it's just going to be watching the Pistons and then just trying to enjoy the rest of the basketball slate.
Sounds good. So again, I'm Rodney Newpol alongside Aaron Ferguson. This has been Pick and Pop Radio, brought to you by The Grilling Truth. For Aaron Ferguson, Rodney Newpol, have a great night, everyone.